Welcome to the It's Your Story to Tell podcast, where brave people share how they overcame tough times to inspire others and explore what's possible. I'm your host, Megan Babcock, the founder of It's Your Story to Tell podcast and the Coach Collective. I'm looking forward to today's conversation with Cristie Cerniglia, a certified relationship coach. We're going to discuss navigating difficult relationships and finding hope when you feel exhausted, overwhelmed, and out of options. Whether you're frustrated because your partner refuses to change, or you're facing other relationship challenges, or maybe you just want to improve your relationship, this episode is going to be for you. Our hope is you'll walk away from this feeling hopeful about the possibility of transforming your relationship. Thank you, Cristie, for being here with me today and being willing to share your story and expertise on walking a path towards a magnetic marriage. Thanks for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's so good to be together, and I'm really excited. Just when I hear the word magnetic marriage, I'm like, oh, this is going to be good. Who doesn't want a magnetic marriage? And I love when I start out talking in a podcast to just let our listeners get to know you a little bit and learn kind of the journey that you went on and why this is such a passion for you. So I'll let you just kick it off and tell us a little bit about how you became what you are today as a relationship coach.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm Cristie Cerniglia. I live in Lexington, Kentucky with my husband. Tomorrow is our 30th wedding anniversary.
Wow.
Feels like a
Congratulations.
miracle. Thank you. Thank you.
That is a miracle. It really is. You know, bringing two people, and then in 30 years, how often we change, we grow, and then you have to change and grow together. So it really is a testament to just your ability to work together and grow.
And God's goodness for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, but you asked what kind of got me started on this. And I think really it was my senior year in high school. My own parents suddenly and out of the blue decided to get divorced. And it was very painful. And it was a very hard time. And I think ever since then, I've had a real heart and a passion for marriage and family and have wanted to do my part to not only keep my own marriage healthy and happy, but to help other people as well. So about 3 years ago, when there were some bumps in our marriage road, I started to read more. I love to read. I read lots of marriage books and things, but nothing was kind of hitting the spot until I found Laura Doyle's book called The Empowered Wife. And it's a New York Times bestseller. And it was just completely different than anything else I had read. And I really felt like she had her finger on some of the issues that were happening in my marriage that I was so unaware of. And so it really sparked my interest and got me started.
I love that empowered wife. Is that
Yes.
Wow, great title. And just, how important it is as our role as a wife and just what we can do to influence our relationships. And so I'm really excited to kind of hear how you walked through applying that in your own marriage and then how you now walk alongside of other women.
Yeah. Well, the first time Laura Doyle published the book, it was called The Surrendered Wife. And she found that a lot of women didn't like that, which is funny because I think both are true. I'm surrendered and I'm empowered. I'm empowered because I'm surrendered. And the surrendered part really has to do with relinquishing control of the things that I don't have any control over, which is everything outside of me, right? I'm the only one that I really have control over. And so I'm empowered when I recognize that. So in the past, I felt like, my husband just really needs to make some changes. He's really got some problems. He really needs to do some work and this sort of thing. But guess what? If he doesn't, where does that leave me? completely powerless and I'm a victim and I'm unhappy and there's no hope, right?
Right.
But when I read her book and I realized, no, there are things that I can do to change the dance. And that when I show up differently, he responds to me differently. And I start to get a lot of the things that I've been looking for, but I was going about them the wrong way and I didn't know it. So it's a really interesting idea, but it's not what people are talking about. You know, it's not the traditional things that you've read about in every other marriage book. It's different. And so it only applies when women are really motivated and they're courageous to experiment with something a little bit different than what they're used to.
I love that she recognized that, like, this title is not resonating, which I could, naturally I'm like, ooh, surrendered. Like,
Yeah.
but I love the way you explained surrender, because it is so true. We cannot control anything outside of ourselves. And so that is basically saying, like, I'm just going to let go of this. This is not something that I can change. I don't like the situation I'm in. Okay, now what? You have to try something different. The same thing has not worked. You've done it over and over again. So tell us, maybe give us an example. How does this work, changing the dance?
Yeah. Well, the first thing that I always start my new clients off with, and it's the first chapter in the book. And it's so funny, Megan, because so many women pick up the book and they go, oh, I'm not going to read that part. Who cares about that? Right. And they skip over the very first thing, which is self-care. And part of it is they don't understand, but we have to be happy. Miserable people do not have happy relationships. Only happy people have happy relationships. And as women, we can get so bogged down with our responsibilities, right? We've got a husband, we've got kids, we've got work, we've got a home, bills, all the responsibilities that we carry. And when we feel overwhelmed by that burden of all those responsibilities, we can get cranky. We can get grouchy. We can feel resentful or bitter because we feel like I have to do everything around here, right? And it makes it really tough to have a happy, fun marriage. So the first thing I want to do with the ladies that I work with is help them to find their joy again. What is it that you enjoy doing? And can you spend a few minutes every day doing something just because you enjoy it to feel good? And women will say, oh, no, I don't have time for that. I'm too busy with this, that, and the other. Well, I don't mean that you're spending the day at the spa. I just mean that you sit down and read a chapter in a book that's fun for you. Or you go out and meet some of your girlfriends for coffee. Or you take a walk and listen to your favorite podcast. Something that makes you feel good and happy and joyful, so that when the husband and the kids come home, you're happy, you're ready to serve and love and be with them because you've filled your own cup, right? And women overlook that, but we really have to be happy to have a happy relationship. So it's worth investing in.
I love that that's where it starts, right? Is just, how can you care for yourself? I know when I was on my journey and healing from toxic relationships and recognizing how I got into those relationships and how I had these beliefs that led to these narratives, and then I was, became a people pleaser and a perfectionist, and so I was go go go, always trying to achieve, and I was exhausted, I was overwhelmed. There was not anything that I was doing for me. In fact, I probably couldn't even tell you at that point, like, what would I want to do for myself? And so having someone to kind of help me to slow down and to ask those questions, it was a really key part of my journey in getting to a place where I had done the healing and the work to be happy, healthy, whole, all alone, so that I could then have a happy, healthy, whole marriage. And so I'm really hope our listeners are really, it's hard to make that time for yourself, but we just want to encourage you that
Mm-hmm.
I think, like you said, it's not an entire day at the spa. It could be, one of the things I do for myself is just like, I have a favorite tea, like
Mm-hmm.
taking note of the things that you like, that
Yes.
you're so busy just getting everything for everybody else. But it's like, no, you like this tea, you like this bath soap, you like,
Yeah.
just because even those little things are just acknowledgement that you value yourself, that you're
Mm-hmm.
worthy of love and attention. And then you are not just looking to everybody else to fill up that love tank. So when they come in grouchy and you're tired, I mean, it's a recipe for disaster.
It's true.
Yeah. So you're starting to take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
What's next? What do
Mm-hmm.
you start doing now to really start changing the way you're interacting in your relationship?
Yeah. Well, let me give you an example of one of my major blind spots was complaining. I did not know that I was a complainer. I wouldn't have said, "Oh yeah, I'm a complainer." I didn't recognize it. I thought I was just sharing, what was on my mind. So
Mm.
on the weekends, we would take my car when we went out to soccer or baseball or church or wherever we were going. And by the time the weekend was over, my car was a mess. There was wrappers and there was water bottles and there was all this stuff. And so on the way home, I would give my best motivational speech that sounded something like this: everybody needs to get all their junk out of my car. I'm tired of cleaning up after you people, blah, 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 right? Well, guess what? Nobody was inspired. Everybody just scattered, like, oh, mom's in a mood, run for your life, right? And so I realized that that was not effective. And so I learned how to express my desires in a way that inspires. So what I learned is that complaining is actually a lazy desire. So what did I want in that moment when I'm complaining about the car being so dirty? I just wanted a clean car. So I decided to try and experiment with a different way. And what I said to my family was, I would love to have a clean car. Wow, the reaction was so different. You know what my husband said? He said, I'll take it and go get it cleaned. He took it right then over to the car wash and had it all cleaned out for me. And I got exactly what I wanted. Not only did I get what I wanted, because my husband wants to make me happy, and he was actually able to hear my desire when I said it like that, rather than the complaining and criticizing that I was saying previously.
Mhm.
But not only did I get that, but then when he comes home with this clean car and I'm able to pour on the gratitude and say, thank you so much. You take such good care of me. Guess what? I get more of what I want because he feels appreciated. He feels successful as a husband in making me happy. I didn't know that, Megan. I didn't know that a man feels successful when his wife is happy. And when she's unhappy, he feels like a failure as a husband. And it really impacts the way he shows up. So now I try my best to use lots of gratitude and to be pleasable, you know?
Mm, that's so good. Yeah. Easy, but yet
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah.
hard, right? Because
Yeah.
our our natural reaction is like we're feeling overwhelmed, our
Mm-hmm.
nervous system is getting all excited, our voice gets raised,
Mm-hmm.
and no one wants to be around that. It's
It's
not
true.
inspiring. It doesn't feel good. We all know what it feels like to be around somebody who's emitting that kind of energy. It's like, oh, you're making me anxious just being next to you. It's much less, I'm going to try to get out of here as fast as I can. And so being able to pause and
Mm-hmm.
assess how you're speaking in your relationships to determine if it's coming from a place of getting what you desire. I love that you said, my husband wants to please me. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we as people, I think, just the way we were created is we want to please people. We don't want to just like, our kids don't intentionally go like, oh, well, sometimes maybe they do, but most of the time, most of the time, it's not like this conscious thing of like, how can I make mom really miserable today and feel like she's worthless and can't do anything right? But if we can just tell people what we need, and that was something that was hard for me as a child. I didn't really have that opportunity to kind of share my needs or talk about feelings and emotions. And so not learning to do that as a child makes it very difficult to do when you're an adult and you're in a relationship and you just don't know how to do it. So for somebody who's like, I don't even know how to talk about my my desires or my feelings or my needs, what would you say if you were in a session and they're like, I don't even know how to do that, or I don't even know what I'm doing wrong right now?
Right, right. Well, that's why during coaching, I ask them, give me an example of a challenge that's happened in your relationship lately. And when they would explain that to me, the car is trashed then I could help them to see it in a different way. And it's so true. We call them blind spots because we don't know. Right. But a lot of coaching is saying, okay, you're looking at it from here. Let's look at it from over here instead. And I didn't realize it. And I didn't realize that so much of my complaining was coming off disrespectful to my husband too, which of course is so important to them. But you and I know that complaining isn't attractive on anyone, right?
Right.
Even if it's not your spouse, as a friend, you don't want to be around someone who complains all the time. You want to be around someone who's grateful and thankful and upbeat and those things. So we need to start showing up that way, but also that we act almost like a husband mirror to our spouse. And so he looks at me to see kind of, who am I? How am I doing? And he can see from my face if my face is admiring him and respecting him and believing that he's smart and capable, or if I'm looking at him going, turn right here or we're going to be late. Park over there. And, you need to wear the blue shirt with the khaki pants and all of those types of things. Or one of my favorites was, if I was you, I would do it like this, right? All of this teaching and instructing and helping comes off as controlling and disrespectful to our husbands. So one of the best things I think for us as wives to remember is, I have married this wonderful, smart, capable man, and he is well able to handle what's on his paper. And I'm going to stay here on my paper and make my paper beautiful, right? Rather than interfering and meddling and messing around with his responsibilities and what's on his paper. You know what? My husband was getting himself dressed and paying his car payment long before he met me. He does not need my help with those things. So that's been a lesson for me as well, is that he loads the dishwasher and the dishes get clean. He doesn't do it the way I do it, and that's okay. Right? He gets to do it the way he thinks is good, and I get to do it the way I think is good. So I don't have to control everything. I can really relax. I can relinquish control, and it gives me more free time to make myself happy through the self-care,
Yeah.
But you were asking about changing things. I would ask a client to write down, what is one of your complaints about your husband? And then let's talk about, how do we flip that and turn into a desire that you can express in a way that inspires, So say for my husband has weight that he needs to lose, and he eats unhealthy many times. And you don't know how much I've tried to control that and get in there and advise and help and all of those things, right? Do you think that has helped him to take off that weight? No, it has not, I promise. And in fact, probably turned him the other way in many ways, right? But when I relinquish control, and instead of saying, my husband doesn't eat healthy or doesn't exercise, that might be my complaint. I can flip that and say, my husband is smart enough to take good care of himself. And when I believe that, I'm in a much more relaxed and happy position than I am when I'm believing that he takes terrible care of himself and he's, on the edge of death.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that is important, at least in the coaching too, that I do, is often these things are triggering something, a fear or something
Mm-hmm.
that you have, an insecurity, right? So
Mm-hmm.
in that case, it could be that person is afraid of what might happen in our family if my husband has a heart attack
Right.
and can't work or passes away. And so there is this opportunity to acknowledge, like, what is that fear that you have? Because there's also then a desire, right?
Yes.
Because I love you and I don't want to do life without you.
Yes.
And I'm scared that something might happen to you. When we come and we share our emotions and like
Mm-hmm.
what is going on behind the words that are coming out, the person has this opportunity to see your heart, not
Yes.
just these words that are coming at you. And it was interesting because as you were sharing, one of the things, and an interesting interaction with my husband came up, and that I was like, oh, I've got to share this. So he likes to go to Costco, which is great because I don't love Costco. But we were on a Costco trip, and we were getting all this stuff, and then we're leaving Costco, and he's like looking at the receipt and just like, oh my gosh, we spent this much money. And that activates my nervous system because I didn't know it at the moment, because I took time to kind of, why am I responding to this? That was the first thing. It's like, I knew I was being activated. My nervous system was making me feel very uncomfortable, and I didn't respond in that moment. And I just decided to get curious about, okay, what is it that is causing me to have this response to him? We shopped together. I wasn't buying things that we weren't like needing for our household or anything like that. So we had about a 20-minute drive, and probably about 10 minutes into it, I said, I was just thinking about how I was feeling when you were looking at the receipt. And I realized it reminded me of some times in my childhood where I felt like a burden, or like, oh, it's just so much expense that we spend on
Mm-hmm.
you. And
Mm-hmm.
it was triggering that in me when I saw that. And he was like, oh gosh, I don't want you to feel that way. He was like, I just can't believe the cost of food these days, and it's just so crazy. And so I was able to then hear that wasn't his intent, but we assign motive to someone's words without even knowing if that's what they mean. And then you've heard, perception is reality. If you just leave it there, that does become your reality. But if you take an opportunity
Mm-hmm.
to talk to the other person and just share about your feelings, and I think I even used, because this came from Brene Brown, and it was the story I'm telling myself. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not like you meant it. It's not that I know what your intent was, but it was like, when you said that, the story I was telling myself, which allows the other person to be less reactive and defensive, because you're not like, you said this, you did this, you
Right.
made me, you. It's like focusing it back on yourself and how you felt. And he learned something about me that day, and I was able to not walk around with a wound now,
Yeah.
and have that bitterness that you were talking about. So
Yeah.
I love how having someone share perspective, whether it's a coach who's helping you, or if you're sharing your perspective within your relationships. The other thing that I thought was really important that you touched on was this feeling of control, because I was a control freak, because I was so insecure in just so many different things and had a lot of fear, which would come out in, I had to have my house perfect. Everything had to be clean. Like my kids could not leave shoes out, or their bed not made, or their toothbrush on the countertop. And it was like I was a drill sergeant. And I wasn't doing it because for any reason except to try to calm myself and my own anxieties down. And so it wasn't working because I was still anxious. So then you move on to something else that you would try to control. And so it really wasn't until I started really understanding like where there had been wounding in my life that I could work on those things in me. And now I'm like, okay, there's certain areas of the house that don't come and just dump all your stuff. If you want your room we have a certain level of tolerance. And if I come in and it's, creating bugs and all of that, no way. But I can close the door and walk away from it and give them some freedom. And then what I find, just like you were saying, like with your husband, people do more when they're not being like picked at and having it. They're like, I don't like it either, but I just was like tuning you out, and I was kind of being resistant because I was just like, stop nagging me.
Yeah.
And then you walk away and you're like, oh my gosh, we would have all been so much more peaceful if I had just dealt with how I was feeling internally. And I think that's what's so powerful. One, the surrender, but two, recognizing that you aren't a victim in that empowerment, right? Because they really are the flip side of the same coin. And you have to release people, but then why do you feel this way? And that's the empowerment part, because then you can go and strengthen those areas. You can deal with the, inner child healing that you might need to be able to like have these happy, healthy relationships. This has been so fun. If you had to leave one pearl, could you pick one? We've talked about self-care and kind of how we change our criticism and that the way we talk to be sharing our desires. But what is the one thing that you would suggest to somebody who is struggling in a relationship right now?
Wow. Well, one of the things I always ask the women who show up to my workshops is, how many of you have someone who you'd like to change? And of course, everybody raises their hand, right? And then I ask them, how many of you would like to be changed by someone else? No one, right? We just want to reach out and change everybody else.
So good.
But I love what you brought up. What you brought up in the example of my husband's weight and health is you brought out vulnerability that says, I'm afraid that something's going to happen to you. That is sharing from my paper. And that's very, very different than trying to control him by saying, are you sure you want to have a Coke? Wouldn't you rather have a water? Right? Those are two very different things. It's like vulnerability versus control. You can have one or the other. You can't have both. And vulnerability leads to connection and intimacy, but control does not. And so, like you said, when I have that urge to control, there is that fear that's underneath. And if I can look at that fear, I can say, what am I afraid of? Well, I'm afraid he's going to be unhealthy and have a heart attack. Is that realistic? Yeah, it's a little bit realistic. Can I control it? No, I can't make him exercise and I can't change what he eats. And the last and most powerful question is it worth the intimacy I'm going to lose to try to control it? No, but I didn't realize in the bad old days that I was choosing between control or intimacy. And I was choosing control every time. It was like my default setting was to take that road, take that road, take that road. And so when I began practicing the skills, I had to forge a new path over here that led toward intimacy. But first, I had to be aware that I had the choice to begin with. So when women first start practicing these skills, it feels hard to choose intimacy instead of control, or to choose respect rather than criticism. But eventually that road gets paved more and more, and we start to get the results back from our husband that we've been wanting all along. So we start to see the rewards, and pretty soon it becomes second nature. And it's so beautiful, because as we treat him with respect and honor, as we show up as our dignified, happy selves, as we let go of control and work with what's within our power to work on, which is ourselves, then we start to see that beautiful connection and intimacy blossoming in our relationship. And we're like, oh, you mean I had the power all along? Why didn't anybody tell me this? Why didn't
we're
they
telling
teach
you
me
now?
this?
We're telling you now, right? Well, I think all of that does boil down like one thing. And I think vulnerability really is so key, because it does lead to connection, which which most likely we're afraid of losing in all of these different scenarios, or you're afraid of not having your needs met and all of those things. And when we act out of fear, we know the Bible says, don't fear, have faith. And if faith is this positive side, right? It's proclaiming what will be and what you want, because the thing is our words are so powerful. So what we say, or even don't say, but act out in those control, really ends up becoming like, I am afraid I'm going to end up alone as a woman. My husband might pass, or I'm afraid of getting divorced. Well, if that is what your mind is constantly focused on, it will become. So vulnerability could mean vulnerability with your spouse. It could be vulnerability with a good friend. It could be vulnerability with a coach, because you have to start being able to have these conversations. And sometimes as you're learning, that's what's beautiful about a coach, is they're not emotionally triggered or entangled with you. That's the beautiful thing about having a coach, because they are not in the relationship with you. They're not emotionally triggered by the same things. So you can try out vulnerability in a place that is, I'm going to use the word safe, but safe in the fact that they're not going to have the same reaction, because you and your husband or your significant other, you've been having this kind of dance that you've been doing. And so when you go to change it, that can disrupt things too. So it's nice to have someone to practice with. How would people get connected with you? You mentioned that you do workshops. So tell us a little bit about you and your practice.
Yeah, I work exclusively with women. My experience is as a woman, as a wife, right? I focus majority on marriages, and yet I've had success with these skills in other relationships, like with my mom and my brother, with my adult kids, with my teen kids. So I'm open to all of that as well. I'm on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn, and you can go to my website at relationshipswithamap.org. And yeah, I run workshops where I teach all 6 intimacy skills and give homework so you can begin practicing these skills right away. I do individual one-on-one coaching, and then we do group coaching as well, which, sometimes women learn really well from group coaching because it's not directly to them. I'm talking to you instead, and these other ladies can take that and apply it. Because most of the time we're dealing with a similar root issue. It's just showing up in different ways in each one of our lives, right? But we all need the reminders of where we're going and how to get there, because otherwise when we don't use it, we lose it, don't we?
Sorry, you cut out for a minute. And I couldn't hear you, so I couldn't respond, but you were talking about group coaching.
I said, if you don't use it, you lose it, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Well, this has been really fun. Thank you so much for joining me. We will put the links to get connected to you in the show notes. And if this has been helpful for you, we'd love for you to comment on the show. And we'd also like for you to share it. So if you know someone who could benefit, and pretty much there's not anyone who could not benefit from this, because we can all learn how to have better relationships with our significant others, our children, and really, in our communities. This is a time right now where things are heated, and just so many different polarizing opposites, and being able to listen to people, to be vulnerable, to hear where they're coming from, and just meet them in that place is really powerful. So have a great day. Thanks so much, Cristie, for being here with me today.
Thank you.